The lights in the Hale Dynamics lobby were rigged for television. 400,000 viewers watched the live feed of Behind the Empire, and Vivienne Hale stood at the marble podium, mid-sentence, when a janitor's cart rolled into frame. She laughed, the sound bright and practiced. "Some people," she said, "spend their entire lives mopping floors because they never learned how to stand up." The man pushing the cart stopped for exactly 2 seconds. He looked into the camera, gave a single polite nod, and walked on. He did not hurry. He did not flinch. The clip began trending before she finished her speech. By 10 that night, the clip had crossed 1.2 million views. In the corner office on the 42nd floor, Vivienne stood at the window with a glass of something dark, and Marcus Whitfield raised his own glass to her reflection in the black glass. "You made it look effortless," he said. "It was effortless. That's the part the algorithm loves. Cruelty that wears a smile." She did not correct him. She had stopped correcting Marcus a long time ago. Outside the window, the Charles River lay flat and black, and the lights of Cambridge blinked across it like a quieter city refusing to compete. Across town, in a third-floor walk-up off Dorchester Avenue, Daniel Carter set his keys down on the kitchen counter. Without making a sound, the television was on, muted, casting blue light across the carpet. His daughter Lily had fallen asleep on the sofa with a library book open across her chest, a paperback on the rings of Saturn. He stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe. Then he closed the book gently, slid one arm beneath her knees and the other beneath her shoulders, and carried her down the narrow hallway. He had to angle her carefully through the door. He tucked the blanket up to her chin and turned off the light, and the house grew quiet in the way that only homes with a single sleeping child can grow quiet. He did not check his phone. He did not open the laptop. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark for a while, and then he made himself a sandwich he did not eat. The next morning he arrived at the Hale Dynamics building at 6:45, the same as every morning. The security guard at the loading dock would not meet his eyes. In the locker room, 2 of the cleaning crew stopped talking the moment he walked in. One of them, a younger man named Hector, looked at the floor and said, very quietly, "I'm sorry, man." "Nothing to be sorry for," Daniel said. He pulled on his gloves. At 7:30, he was wiping down the elevator panels when the lobby doors opened and Vivienne Hale walked in. He felt her notice him. He did not turn. He kept wiping the brushed steel until she stepped into the car. The doors closed. 42 floors of vertical silence. She waited. She had spent 11 years in rooms where waiting was a weapon, and she waited now for him to flinch, to apologize, to spit something back. He did none of these things. He pressed the button for her floor without being asked, because he had watched her every morning for 9 months and knew which one it was. She noticed, peripherally, that he had pressed the second of the 2 indistinguishable buttons, the one she always chose because the other one stuck faintly under the thumb. She had never told anyone in the building that. "Good morning, Miss Hale," he said. She studied his profile. There was nothing there, no resentment, no theater, just a man doing his job in a moving box. The elevator chimed. He held the door for her, gestured her out, and went back to wiping the panels as if the last 90 seconds had not happened. By noon, Marcus had suggested, twice, that they terminate the janitor's contract before the news cycle pivoted. "Clean break," he said. "Cleaner story." Vivienne tapped a pen against the edge of her desk. "No, Vivienne." I said no. She did not know when she said it, why she had said it. She told herself it was optics. She told herself it was the lawyers. She told herself a great many things that afternoon, and none of them was the truth. Eleanor Briggs arrived on Tuesday at 11, exactly as she had arrived on the same Tuesday of every quarter for the last 3 years. She wore a charcoal suit and carried a leather folio worn soft at the corners, and she announced herself to the receptionist with the kind of courtesy that suggested she had once been someone's grandmother and had not enjoyed being underestimated for it. In Vivienne's office, the meeting took 12 minutes. Eleanor presented the quarterly holdings report from Vance Capital, a passive institutional investor that had been on the Hale Dynamics cap table since before Vivienne's father died. Eleanor turned pages. Vivienne initialed each one in the lower right corner without reading, as she had initialed them every quarter for 3 years. "Same as always," Vivienne said. "Same as always," Eleanor agreed. "Vance Capital extends its continued confidence in your leadership. Pass that along, would you?" "I always do." They shook hands. Eleanor packed her folio. At the door she paused, half-turned, and looked at Vivienne for a beat longer than was customary. Then she left. In the elevator down, Eleanor took out her phone. The call connected on the second ring. "Have you seen the clip?" she said. A man's voice answered. It was low, even, and tired in a way that did not come from sleeplessness. "I've seen it. Do you want me to handle it?" One letter, and she'd be in council by morning. A pause. "No, Daniel. Let her walk the rest of the way down this road herself, Eleanor. She has to find the bottom before she can find a floor, and if the bottom hurts her, then she'll remember what hurts." Eleanor stepped out into the lobby. Across the marble floor, a man in gray coveralls was wiping a smudge from the glass of the revolving door, slow and methodical, as if the smudge were the only thing in the world that mattered. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He did not check it. He finished the panel, folded the rag, and moved to the next. That night, Vivienne stayed in the office until nearly 10. She told her assistant it was the shareholder prep. It was not the shareholder prep. She was standing at the window with her arms crossed when, 2 floors below, the lobby lights came on in sequence, and she saw the reflection of a man in coveralls wiping the inside of the south-facing glass. He looked up, as if he felt the weight of being watched, and their eyes met across the dark. For half a second, the geometry was wrong. He did not look at her the way a janitor looks at a chief executive. He looked at her the way a man looks at a problem he has decided not to solve yet. Then he went back to the glass. An hour later, she sat down at her desk to find a small ceramic cup of ginger tea cooling on the corner of her blotter, a slice of lemon floating on top. She had been coughing all day. No one in the building knew her well enough to bring her ginger tea, much less leave it without a note. She did not drink it for a long time. She only sat and looked at it, the way one looks at evidence. In a third-floor walk-up off Dorchester Avenue, Daniel Carter opened a small steel safe in the back of his bedroom closet. Inside lay his wife's will, a folded marriage certificate, and a brass company seal pitted with use. He touched the seal with the pad of his thumb. "Caroline," he said, "I'll know when it's time." He sat with the seal a long time. The brass had grown warm in his palm by the time he finally closed the safe and turned the dial. A week passed. The clip stopped trending. Other executives said other things in other lobbies, and the internet, hungry, moved on. Vivienne did not move on. She began staying later than she needed to. She told her assistant it was the upcoming shareholder meeting, and the proxy fight she could feel building somewhere beneath Marcus's polished smile, and that was half true. The other half walked the halls of the 42nd floor at 10 and 11 and midnight, pushing a cart that squeaked in the third wheel. She arranged to need things. The coffee machine in the executive kitchen was broken 3 days in a row, though it had not been broken once in the prior 18 months. She left her office door open when she heard the cart approach. She made small talk about the cold front coming in over the Berkshires, about whether the snow would hit before Thanksgiving, about the way the city looked at 3 in the morning from the 42nd floor. Daniel answered briefly and asked nothing in return. One night she leaned in the doorway of the supply closet while he refilled a dispenser and asked casually where he had grown up. "Lowell," he said, "and before this, a few things. Such as," he considered her. "Engineering for a while." "Where?" "MIT. A long time ago." She laughed. It was the laugh of a woman who had been told a joke and intended to be kind about it. MIT, of course. And how does an MIT engineer end up here? Same way anyone ends up anywhere. Things changed. He did not elaborate. He did not correct her laugh. He twisted the top back onto the dispenser, wished her a quiet night, and pushed his cart down the hall. She watched him go and felt, with no warning, the small, cold sensation of having just lost something she had not known was a game. Marcus saw them talking on Thursday. He did not say anything that day. On Friday, he walked into her office without knocking and closed the door. "Vivienne." "Marcus, the janitor. What about him?" "Don't make me say it twice. Whatever this is, it ends. The PR risk on this building is already on watch. We cannot afford a second story." She set her pen down very carefully. She had set her pen down very carefully 1,000 times in this office, and Marcus had always taken it as agreement. "Marcus," she said, "do you remember the press release you wrote when my father died? The one that called me the heiress, assuming her father's vision?" "I do. I have never asked you to write a press release about me again. I am not asking you for advice about my building or my staff. If I want either, I will ask. Are we clear? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. The practiced smile. The one that suggested he was filing the conversation away for later use. Crystal. When he was gone, she sat down at her laptop and typed a name into the search bar. Daniel Carter. MIT. Structural engineer. Boston. Nothing. She refined the search. She refined it again. She tried photo searches and alumni directories and old conference programs, and the database the company used for vendor diligence. Nothing. Not a profile, not a paper, not a single line. He had been scrubbed. She closed the laptop, and she sat in the dark for a long time, listening for the squeak of a wheel. Friday afternoon, the lobby of Hale Dynamics held the late autumn light in slow yellow rectangles across the marble floor, and at one of the lobby benches sat a girl of about 8, knees together, ankles crossed, a hardcover textbook open across her lap. Vivienne would not have stopped if not for the book. She caught the title and passing Introduction to Astrophysical Mechanics, and her steps slowed before she had decided to slow it. The girl looked up. She had a freckle on the bridge of her nose, and a way of holding her head that suggested she had been told, more than once, that adults would speak to her if she looked attentive. "Hello," Vivienne said. "Hello? Is that yours? It's from the library at Northeastern. My dad takes me on Saturdays. Do you understand it?" "Some parts. I'm working on the chapter about precession." Vivienne sat down on the bench. She had not sat on a lobby bench in 7 years. "Tell me about precession," she said. The girl's face changed. It opened the way some children's faces open when an adult asks them a real question for the first time. It's the wobble. When something spins, like a top, it doesn't just spin straight. The axis traces a little circle, very slowly. The Earth does it too. Every 26,000 years it draws a full circle in the sky. 26,000. That's why the North Star isn't always the North Star. A long time ago it was a different one, called Thuban. And in 12,000 years it'll be Vega, which is my favorite. Why Vega? Because it's blue. Vivienne smiled before she remembered to. "What's your name?" "Lily." "That's a pretty name, Lily." "Thank you." "What's yours?" "Vivienne." "That's a pretty name, too." They sat for another half a minute, and Vivienne, who had read 47 leadership books and could quote from any of them on demand, found that she had nothing she wanted to say. A soft sound at the far end of the lobby. Daniel Carter, out of his coveralls, in a worn flannel shirt and jeans, his coat over his arm. He saw them. He stopped 3 meters away and waited. Vivienne looked up. Something in her face stilled. For the first time, she was not looking at a janitor. "Lily," he said, gentle. "Time." The girl closed her book, slid off the bench, and on impulse turned and put her arms around Vivienne's neck. Vivienne went rigid. Then, slowly, she let one hand come up to rest on the small of the child's back. The hug lasted 4 seconds. "It was nice to meet you, Miss Vivienne," Lily said, and she went to her father and they walked out together into the cold. Vivienne watched them through the revolving doors. The girl reached up, and Daniel caught her hand without looking down, the practiced reach of a parent who had done this every afternoon for years. They turned left at the corner. They were gone. Vivienne sat on the bench a while longer. She did not look toward the elevators. She did not look toward the windows. She looked at the door they had gone through. On the 4th-floor balcony, Marcus Whitfield stood watching. The rim of his coffee cup paused at his lower lip. He did not move for a long time. Then he set the cup down, walked to a quieter corner of the mezzanine, and dialed a number he had not dialed in a year. "It's me," he said. "I need you to dig deeper on the janitor. Whatever's strange about him, I want it." The Q3 numbers came in on Wednesday. They missed analyst expectations by 40 cents a share. Marcus made his move in the standing committee meeting that afternoon, the way a man makes a move when he has been planning it for weeks. He spoke about market confidence and about the importance of seasoned faces during difficult cycles. He used the word stewardship 4 times. He did not use Vivienne's name once. By Wednesday evening, she had the analyst on her own team run the proxy math. Marcus had collected commitments from 4 institutional holders, 6 more percentage points, and he would have the floor at the special meeting. She did not eat dinner. She did not leave the office. By midnight she had read every email Marcus had sent in the last quarter, and by 1 in the morning she understood that he had been preparing to remove her since the day she had inherited the chair. There was a drawer in her desk she had not opened since her father's funeral. She opened it now. Inside lay a single envelope with her name on it in his handwriting, and beside it a note she had written 3 days into the job and never sent. She read the note. She read what her father had written. Then she put both back in the drawer and closed it. There were no answers in there, only the people who had been gone for the asking. At 1:15 there was a soft knock on the open door. Daniel stood in the threshold with a brown paper bag and a bottle of water. "You haven't come out," he said. "I'm working." "I know." He set the bag on the corner of her desk. Inside was a turkey sandwich on rye, an apple, and a small bag of pretzels. "Big decisions shouldn't be made on an empty stomach," he said. She looked at the bag. She looked at him. 11 months ago, on a live stream that had not yet been recorded, she had told 400,000 strangers that men like him had never learned how to stand up. "Daniel," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. "Yes. Why don't you hate me?" He did not answer right away. He stood in the doorway with his hands in the pockets of his coveralls, and the building made the small night sounds buildings make at 1 in the morning, and at last he said, "Because you're afraid. People who are afraid don't need any more enemies." He turned to leave. "Daniel." He looked back. "Who are you?" He smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that did not reach the eyes because it didn't need to. "I'm the man who's bringing you a sandwich at 1 in the morning, Miss Hale. Eat it before it gets cold." He pulled the door halfway closed behind him. Vivienne sat at her desk with the bag in front of her, and for the first time in 6 years, she put her face in her hands and she cried. She did not cry quietly. She did not cry the way she had been trained to cry, on cue, behind a closed bathroom door at her father's funeral. She cried the way a person cries when they have been holding a stone in their mouth for a very long time, and have finally been told they can spit it out. She cried for the woman she had told herself she was, who had not existed. She cried for the people she had stepped over on the way up the building. She cried for her father, who had been a hard man and not a cruel one, and for the difference she had failed to honor. She cried until she could not cry anymore, and then she sat very still and listened to her own breathing. When she was done, she ate the sandwich. She ate the apple. She drank the water. She washed her face in the executive bathroom, and she went home, and for the first time in months, she slept. 3 floors below, in the janitor's closet, Daniel Carter rinsed out a mop and watched the water run gray. She called the emergency board meeting for 8 the next morning. She had to. By the end of the week, Marcus would have his 6th proxy, and she would not have a board to call. At 7:58, the directors filed into the boardroom on the 43rd floor. Marcus took his usual chair to her left. He looked rested. He looked like a man who had been told he was about to win. She let him speak first. He stood, slid a black binder to the center of the table, and began the language of the motion he had prepared. No confidence. Interim chair. Recommended search for successor leadership. Each sentence shaped over years. The door opened. Eleanor Briggs walked into the room. She had not been invited. The general counsel half rose from his chair. "Mrs. Briggs." "Sit down, Robert," Eleanor said, pleasantly. "I'm exercising rights under Section 7 of the Vance Capital Shareholder Agreement. You may want to read it." She walked to the head of the table, set down a leather folio, and opened it. Inside were 3 documents. She placed them in front of Vivienne with the care of a woman placing flowers on a grave. "On behalf of Vance Capital Holdings," she said, "I am formally withdrawing the firm's standing instruction to vote as a silent partner. From this morning forward, our 51% voting interest will be exercised directly, in person, and on the record." The room went quiet in the way only a boardroom can go quiet, when 9 adults realize at the same instant that the floor they were standing on belongs to someone else. Marcus found his voice first. 51%. That's preferred voting class. That class has never sat at this table. It has now. "Who," Marcus said very carefully, "is the beneficiary of that trust?" Eleanor looked at him as a teacher might look at a student who had at last asked the right question, 3 years late. "The sole beneficiary of the Vance Capital Trust since the death of Mrs. Caroline Vance Carter, 3 years ago this November, has been her husband." Vivienne heard the name. She heard the last name. She heard the small mechanical sound of 1,000 small things sliding into place. Carter. Daniel Carter. A janitor's cart. A cup of ginger tea. A sandwich at 1 in the morning. A man who had not flinched. "Adjourn the meeting," she said. Vivienne Marcus began. "Adjourn it, Marcus, or I will." The meeting adjourned. She did not take the elevator. She took the stairs, all 43 flights, in heels that had not been built for stairs. She came out into the basement corridor breathing hard. the fluorescents humming, the smell of concrete and detergent in the air. He was at the end of the hall, mopping in slow, even strokes. The corridor smelled of pine cleaner and the faint mineral cold that lived in basement air handling systems. A single fluorescent was out 3 meters down, leaving a long oblong of darker linoleum between them. He did not look up. He worked the mop in slow figure eights. She stopped 5 meters away. She had 1,000 sentences in her mouth and could not produce one. Daniel straightened. He set the mop against the wall. He looked at her not the way an employee looks at a chief executive, not the way a man looks at a woman he is meeting for the first time, but the way a man looks at a person he has been waiting 9 months to be seen by. Then he gave her a single polite nod, the same nod, the exact one, and he picked up the mop, and he went back to work. 3 days. She did not see him in the building. She did not call. She did not send Eleanor. The special shareholder meeting convened on Monday morning in the ground floor auditorium of the Hale Dynamics headquarters. 240 seats. Press cordoned at the back. The state attorney general's office had quietly requested observation rights. Marcus took the dais. He spoke for 11 minutes about the necessity of seasoned governance in volatile cycles. He spoke about confidence. He laid out his proxy count, projected on the screen behind him, 53% in support of the motion to remove the chair. He was a man who had counted his votes 100 times. He called the vote. The doors at the back of the auditorium opened. A man walked down the center aisle in a dark navy suit, unhurried, hands at his sides. No briefcase, no entourage. The room recognized him by halves. First the face from the viral clip, then nothing else, and the silence rolled forward in a wave. He climbed the 3 steps to the dais. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said, into the microphone. "I am the sole trustee of Vance Capital Holdings. I have been the controlling shareholder of this company, holding 51% of the preferred voting class since 2022. Marcus's face did not move. His hands moved. They settled finally on the edge of the lectern. "This man," Marcus said, "was a janitor in this very building 3 days ago." "I was," Daniel said. "I was a structural engineer at MIT before that, and a husband after that, and a father after that. The janitor's work was the work that let me keep doing the last 2. He turned to the room. "Vance Capital was founded by my late wife's father, Edward Vance, in 1979. In 2020, when Hale Dynamics was 30 days from defaulting on its senior debt, my wife signed the term sheet that kept this company solvent. She did so on the condition that her name not appear on the cap table, because she did not want the rescue to weigh on the woman who would have to lead the company afterward." He paused. "That woman is Vivian Hale. My wife believed she had earned her chair. I have spent the last 9 months in this building making sure my wife was right. She was." He turned to Marcus. "The motion before this meeting is withdrawn. I am voting the Vance interest against any motion to remove the chair, present or future, brought without cause. I am further requesting an independent investigation into the proxy solicitation undertaken by Mr. Whitfield, including the question of whether material non-public information was used in its assembly." He set the microphone back in its holder. The meeting did not so much adjourn as evaporate. Marcus was escorted from the building before noon, pending the investigation. By 2 in the afternoon, the chair of the governance committee had announced his immediate suspension. Vivienne found Daniel in the long glass hallway on the 2nd floor at 4. The corridor was empty. The light through the windows lay across the floor in long blocks of pale gold. "Why didn't you stop her?" she said. "On the live stream. You could have stopped her with 1 phone call. You needed to see yourself in the mirror," he said, "before I needed you to change." "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It isn't. But it worked." She did not answer. She stood at the window beside him for a long time, and the light moved very slowly across the floor. She gave the apology on the same channel, same lobby, same podium. The lighting team had to be rebooked from a vendor that had been politely informed they would never work for Hale Dynamics again, and they came anyway. The producer asked if she wanted talking points. She did not. She stood at the marble podium. The camera went live. 62,000 viewers, then 100,000, then 200. "My name is Vivian Hale," she said. 11 weeks ago I stood in this lobby and I said something cruel about a man who worked in this building. The cruelty was not an accident. It was a habit. The habit was mine. I am not going to ask for his forgiveness on a live stream, because forgiveness asked for on a live stream is not forgiveness. It's marketing. I am only going to say on the record that he is a better person than I have been, and that I intend to spend the rest of my career trying to deserve the chair he chose to leave me in. She stepped down from the podium. She did not take questions. In the comments stream beneath the live feed, the noise that had once mocked the janitor turned itself, slowly, into something else. The viewer count climbed past 300,000 before her statement ended. By the time the producer cut the feed, the number read 412,000. She did not see it. She had already walked out the side door of the lobby and was halfway down the block before she let herself breathe. In a third-floor walk-up off Dorchester Avenue, Daniel Carter sat on the sofa with Lily curled against his shoulder, watching the small television in the corner. The light from the screen made small blue squares on the wall. "Daddy," Lily said. Is that lady your friend?" He was quiet a moment. "I think she's learning how to be her own friend first," he said. "After that, we'll see." Lily nodded once, slowly, as if his answer had explained something she had already half understood. She turned her cheek against his collarbone. Outside the apartment window, a slow rain had started, the first cold rain of November, the kind that washed the leaves off the maples in a single night. Daniel watched it fall through the streetlight on the corner. He did not say anything else. Lily was asleep against him by the second commercial break. The following week she offered him the chairman's seat. He declined. He proposed instead a restructured independent board, 4 new directors chosen by a committee of 3, with the Vance interest retaining its vote, but not its visibility. She would remain chief executive. She would have real autonomy for the first time in her tenure. They worked it out in her office over the course of 3 evenings. On the 3rd evening at 8, he came back with a paper bag, turkey on rye, an apple, pretzels. "You know I can afford catering," she said. "You can," he said. "But the sandwich is better." They ate at her conference table, the lights of Boston smearing across the window behind them. "Daniel," she said, halfway through. "Yes. That's the first time I've said your name without a title." I noticed. She did not look at him when she said it, and he did not look at her when he answered, and the silence that followed was not awkward. It was the kind of silence that builds slowly over the course of a long autumn, in a building full of glass, between 2 people who have stopped lying. She walked him to the elevator at 10. He carried the empty paper bag because there was no wastebasket in the hallway that satisfied him. The doors opened. She did not say goodnight. He did not say it back. He stepped into the car, and the doors closed. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, then walked back to her office, sat down at her desk, and worked until midnight without once checking her phone. In a small bar 3 blocks away, Marcus Whitfield sat in a corner booth with his phone pressed to his ear. "I have a story about the Carter widower you're going to want," he said. "Bring a notebook." The piece ran on a Thursday morning in a mid-tier financial blog, with reach larger than its prestige. The headline was a question. The body was an insinuation. It suggested that Daniel Carter had spent 9 months embedded in the Hale Dynamics building to psychologically position its chief executive, that the rescue of the company had been engineered as leverage, that the recent apology had been coached, that the entire arc was a slow-motion takeover dressed as redemption. By 11, the story had been picked up by 3 larger outlets. By noon, Vivian had scheduled a press conference for 2. She walked into the briefing room without a binder. She did not bring counsel. She brought Eleanor Briggs, who sat in the front row with her hands folded over the leather folio. In 2020, Vivienne said, Hale Dynamics was 30 days from defaulting on $140 million of senior debt. My father had been dead for 6 months. I had been chief executive for 93 days. The board that has just been dissolved this week was preparing at that time to sell the company for parts. A private capital vehicle called Vance Capital wrote a check that saved this company. I did not know who controlled that vehicle. I was told it was a passive institutional investor with no interest in operations. That was true. It was also, deliberately, not the whole truth. The whole truth is that the person who saved this company was a woman named Caroline Vance Carter, who died of pancreatic cancer 6 months later, and who, before she died, instructed her husband to honor the rescue, and to let the woman in the chair earn the chair. Her husband honored that instruction for 3 years. During the most recent 9 months of those 3 years, he chose to do so by working as a member of the cleaning staff in this building, on the night shift, while raising his daughter alone. I humiliated him on a live stream. I owed him nothing. He answered by keeping me in my chair. That is not manipulation. That is a kind of decency I had never met before. and which I am still learning how to recognize. She did not take questions. The story collapsed by Friday afternoon. By Monday, the SEC had opened a formal inquiry into Marcus Whitfield's proxy solicitation. By Wednesday, 2 of his collected institutional holders had withdrawn their commitments and asked, on the record, to be disassociated from the matter. Marcus did not return calls. The mid-tier financial blog that had published his story issued a half-page correction by Friday, then a full retraction the following Monday. The reporter who had written it left journalism 3 months later and took a corporate communications job in Hartford. The 2 larger outlets that had picked up the piece quietly buried their versions and moved on to the next quarter's scandal. None of them named Daniel. None of them needed to. Eleanor came to see Daniel in the 3rd-floor walk-up that weekend. She brought a bottle of bourbon that had been Caroline's father's. "She would have been proud of you," she said. He poured 2 fingers into each glass. "She was right," he said. "That's what matters." Vivienne deserved a second chance. Eleanor watched him over the rim of her glass. "Of which thing?" she said. He did not answer. He looked out the window at the November sky. Eleanor set her glass down on the windowsill. The bottle had been on the high shelf in Edward Vance's library for 31 years, opened twice and corked back both times. She watched Daniel for a while, the way she had watched Caroline in the months before the diagnosis, when she had not yet known there was something to watch for. She did not say what she was thinking. She had been a trust attorney long enough to know that some answers were better arrived at than offered. "Drink your bourbon, Daniel," she said after a while. He drank it. 6 weeks later. The first snow of the season had come overnight, a thin, polite snow that lay along the curbs of Boylston Street like the city had been edited in chalk. Boston had that early winter hush, where the buses ran quieter, and the light stayed gold a half hour longer than it should have. On the 42nd floor of Hale Dynamics, Vivienne Hale sat alone in her office at 6 on a Friday evening. The lights were off except for the lamp on her desk. There was no fire to put out. There was no proxy to count. She was there because she had discovered, that autumn, that she liked the building when it was quiet. She had also discovered, in the small accidental way one discovers things, that Friday evenings were the evenings Daniel Carter came back to the building. He did not come back as an owner. He came back as a father. Lily had been awarded an audit seat in a Northeastern outreach program for gifted middle schoolers, hosted on the 12th floor of the building on Friday afternoons, and Daniel walked her there and walked her home. At 6:15 the elevator chimed on the 42nd floor. Vivienne looked up. Lily came through the door first, bundled in a blue coat with snow still in her hair, running. She crossed the carpet in 5 quick steps and threw her arms around Vivienne's neck without preamble. "Hi. Hi yourself. I made you something." She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket and handed it over with both hands. A hand-drawn star map, careful and small, with constellations labeled in pencil. At the bottom, in a child's slow, careful capitals, "For Masses, V, my favorite constellation, because you stayed up late." Vivienne held it for a long moment. She did not say anything, because the thing she wanted to say did not yet have a sentence shaped for it. Daniel stood in the doorway, snow on the shoulders of his coat, hands in his pockets. He looked at her. "We're heading home," he said. "Lily's making pasta." "Pasta," Vivienne said. "With sauce from a jar," Lily said gravely. "But I add things." "What things?" "Garlic and pepper, and a little bit of butter at the end." "It's important." "It sounds important." Daniel did not move from the doorway. He waited the way he had waited on the live stream, the way he had waited in the basement corridor, the way he had waited for 9 months in a building that he owned and a city that did not know it. "You could come," he said, "if you wanted." Vivienne folded the star map and slid it into the inside pocket of her jacket, against her chest. "I want," she said very softly. She turned off the lamp. For a moment she stood with her hand on the switch. The desk lamp's afterimage burned briefly on the dark window, a small warm rectangle that faded. She did not turn around to look at the office. She had not, until this evening, realized how little she would miss the place when she eventually left it for the night. They walked to the elevator together, Lily between them, one small hand in each of theirs. Outside on Boylston Street the snow was still falling, the slow, lazy kind, and the streetlights had come on early. In the end, the man with the mop had owned the empire all along, but what he chose to build, in the silence of those late nights, was something no shareholder could ever buy.